welcome to this Lights Off session. I hope that you're having a beautiful Green Week, that you're enjoying these conferences, the very interesting week that we had behind us, and that you join us slowly this session today. I'm gonna wait a little bit so that people can slowly come in, get comfortable, look at their screen, and we will start in a few seconds. I'm gonna ask you to get comfortable, take a minute, relax, and control your breathing, because we're going to start this session with a guided meditation session for a few minutes. So we're gonna turn the lights off. If you are at home, you're gonna see a dark screen, and I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes to help you concentrate and relax. Slow down the rhythm of your breathing. Release the tension of this long week and try to empty your mind. Close your eyes if that feels right for you. Inhale deep and slow for 4 seconds. Through the nose and hold your breath for 4 seconds. Release the air through your mouth. You should feel the air inside your belly and your chest moving up and down. Let's repeat this one more time. Inhale and exhale. If you just joined, we're doing a meditation session, so take your time, relax, close your eyes, and concentrate on your breathing. As humans, we are born for connection. It is an essential part of us. A necessity as strong as the need for food, water, and shelter. As babies, we get attached to our caregivers who assure our existence in the world. As we grow, we seek contact with friends, partners, colleagues, family, mentors. We crave for emotional connections with people, hoping to connect and get the feeling of closeness. Continue breathing. Inhale deeply and hold your breath for 4 seconds. And exhale. While we seek to love or be loved by people, we forget the fundamental connection that we have with nature. We treat nature as a longtime friend who has been there with us throughout our life and is willing to surround us forever. We assume that nature will always be there when we need it the most. In our free time, when we want some fresh air in the park. Imagine being surrounded by a lush vegetation. Birds are chirping, a river is flowing, and the fresh air is hitting your face. Continue breathing. Inhale deeply and hold your breath for 4 seconds. Relax your face, shoulders, and neck, and exhale deeply. With people, we strongly believe that long-lasting relationships involve mutual dedication and commitment. We often forget to do the same with nature. We're too busy to nourish the most essential and vital connection that we have with nature. Nature enables our existence in the world. We're part of nature. If we take care about it, our relationship with nature is meant to last forever. But suddenly in the forest, you hear a chainsaw. The tree behind you crashes to the ground. The bird song is replaced by construction sounds getting louder. You are surrounded by streets and traffic. Horns are honking. The long-term friend, nature, has now perished in your home. The sky is polluted. The heat is unbearable. As this environment is not able to support us, the lights turn off. You can open your eyes now. Thank you for following this introductory journey. The Lights Off session is meant to try to tighten up that relationship to nature and rediscover that relationship that we have with nature as a core element of our lives. First of all, I would like to introduce you to the team behind Biodiversity Action Europe who organized this session. To know more about what they are doing to call for action to protect biodiversity through this video.
Salut, je m'appelle Louis et je viens de Grenoble, en France.
Ciao, sono Irina e sono Italo-Shqiptare.
Hi, ich bin Jessica, ich bin deutsch und südafrikanisch.
Мене звати Іріс, я українка, італійка, француженка та угорка.
Moin, ich heiße Felix und ich bin von Lützeburg.
Hallo, ich heiße Nadine und ich komme aus Österreich.
Hoi, ik heet Nienke en ik kom uit Nederland.
Ciao, mi chiamo Sophie, vengo dall'Italia, je viens de France en ik kom ook van België.
So this movement is all about combating the sex mass extinction that we are creating. I want you to take a moment and think, why is nature and biodiversity important to you? And leave your answer in the chat box. So I will read some of your answers a little bit later. But now I want to ask that same question to the team. Why is biodiversity important to you? Let's hear from this video.
Biodiversity means life. A biodiverse nature provides me with food on my table, clean tap water to drink, and clean air to breathe. These are basic human rights. When I advocate for more action for biodiversity, I'm advocating for basic human rights for all people and all generations.
Biodiversity is important to me because it connects people. Nature's gifts, such as food or a hike in the mountains or a common hobby, literally brings people together. For example, my grandfather teaches me through beekeeping how to take care of nature, and that makes us connect.
I grew up in the French Alps, like my father before me, like my grandparents before me. So I associate the nature with the family. For example, a walk in the forest is my grandfather. The bells of the goat running in the pasture is my grandmother. So when I'm fighting for biodiversity conservation, I'm fighting for the family. And I believe that it's an heritage struggle.
So I'm not getting many answers from the audience, but if you would like to say something about it, just let us know, and we will read it a little bit later in the question box. The last question I want to ask to the team is, in this period of high uncertainty, how do they feel about the future? Let's hear from them in this video.
Oh, you're asking me how I feel about my future. I'm 25 years old, and in my life I have experienced 2 economic global crises, a biodiversity and climate crisis, and now a pandemic. So how do you think I feel?
I feel anxious.
I personally feel completely lost. For me, it's really hard to know how the world will be in 20 years. So maybe I'm afraid of it and I'm still in the denial.
Very, very worried.
I feel stressed and nervous.
Extremely frustrated and yet full of hope.
I feel challenged and hopeful.
I feel anxious and yet full of willingness to advocate. I'm super convinced that one day me or one of my Bay members will be sitting in your position and implementing real tangible change.
Now, what you can hear from these people is that there is a lot that needs to be done, and that's why they are so anxious about the future, and yet that we can do something about it. Now, through this conference, we're going to learn about the importance of biodiversity and how to fight to protect it. And the EU is actually directly and indirectly involved in 80% of the member states' environmental laws and play a large role through the Biodiversity Strategy, the Common Agriculture Policy, the Common Fisheries Policy, just to name a few. And now I challenge you, the audience, to take a quiz to test your knowledge on implementation of these policies too. So you can open a tab or in your laptop or your phone, and you can go to joinmyquiz.com and type the code 08039816. You can find the link also in the chat box, or you can check the slide that you will be seeing on your screen to go and check that, that quiz. So in the last 6 months, this team of young people across Europe, they've been working on a call for action and started this Biodiversity Action Europe movement, which engage people in a conversation about doing more to protect biodiversity. In a short amount of time, they have managed to get 556 people and 47 organizations to sign up to their call for action. These call for action urges the European Union to fundamentally address the biodiversity crisis in 3 specific ways, what they call the 3 E's. to engage with science and environmental agreements, to enforce existing laws and regulations, and to enable society to reshape its relationship with nature. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Felix, Sophie, and Ninke to develop a little bit deeper into these 3 E's. So let's start with Felix. Tell us more about how the EU can engage more.
Thank you, Beatrice. It's really an honor to speak here today. Thank you also to the Commissioner Sinkevičius and Director General Finkoja for joining us here today. As young people that are being handed over an increasingly depleted and degraded planet, we greatly appreciate the launch of the EU Green Deal and the ways it is taking shape through the Biodiversity Strategy, the Farm to Fork Strategy, and the Circular Economy Action Plan. The recently signed Leaders' Pledge for Nature ahead of the United Nations Summit on Biodiversity clearly shows the ambition of the EU and countries around the world to reverse the loss of biodiversity. And yet, nature in Europe and beyond continues to be in serious decline. The European Union is worlds away from achieving the Convention on Biological Diversity's 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Biodiversity is crumbling, and with it, our life support system. Whereas the current political climate seems very promising and very ambitious, we reserve the right to be skeptical until transformative change materializes. The EU is still supportive of counterproductive initiatives, unsustainable industrial large-scale farming under the Common Agricultural Policy, and trade deals that risk further increasing global deforestation, biodiversity loss, and social injustices. We need an EU where biodiversity is at the center of decision-making processes, across sectors and at all levels, if we ever are to truly create the system-wide transformative change that's necessary to realize the vision of a healthier, more equitable and inclusively prosperous future. For this, we do not call for some intangible, out-of-the-box solution. We call for common sense. We call for the EU to engage with the best available scientific and socioeconomic evidence on the urgent biodiversity crisis, its impacts and mitigating measures to create ambitious, inclusive, and efficient transformative change across all sectors, to redefine our relationship with nature. We call for the EU to truly engage with the global and regional multilateral environmental agreements and align the EU's priorities across all sectors to those outlined by global environmental conventions and their visions. Sophie, I hand over to you now to talk about the second E, enforce.
Thank you, Felix. Recognizing that biodiversity keeps on declining dramatically, the European Parliament adopted an ambitious resolution in January 2020 on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, calling for better enforcement of EU nature protection laws. Many of Europe's policies on nature are ambitious, fit for purpose, and can all significantly contribute to reversing the biodiversity crisis if fully implemented and enforced. The EU Birds, Habitats and Water Directives from 1979, 1992 and 2000 respectively continue to be strong legal tools used by governments and environmentalists across the continent. Yet, we are still seeing excessive logging in the Carpathian forests in Romania, consuming the last European primary and old-growth forests. France and Spain are not using the EU Maritime and Fisheries Fund to transition to sustainable fisheries. Local communities are still fighting to protect the Achilles Delta, one of Greece's most important wetlands. These are just some of the examples of a lack of implementation of these legal instruments. Enforcement has been equally weak for the past 10 years. A recent report by the European Environmental Bureau and BirdLife showed that of the 11 member states that were taken to the EU Justice Court for breaking environmental laws, only 3 stopped their destructive behavior and attempted to reverse the damage. Both the EU and the member states are shirking their responsibility to implement and enforce nature protection. We don't need more ambition if it will just lead to a bigger failure. We call for more knowledge of member states' context and specific needs to improve implementation and sincere cooperation. We call for member states to be responsible and follow through on their environmental promises. We call for the creation of an effective monitoring and sanctioning system. Nienke, the floor is yours to talk about the third E, enable.
Thank you, Sophie. We were happy to hear that the European Parliament is moving towards banning unpaid internships, and we welcomed the increasing EU LIFE budget for nature restoration. But it is not enough. The LIFE budget is a drop of water in an ocean compared to the amount of harmful subsidies. The Common Agricultural Policy still gives subsidies to factory farms, and judging from the deeply disappointing vote this week, this is far from changing. And why are we still giving tax breaks to the fossil fuel industry? The reality is, rich lobbies pressurize politicians to water down transition efforts and deregulate how taxpayer money is spent. And the LIFE budget is only accessible to a handful of big organizations. Not all hope is lost, though. There are many people trying very hard to change the planet for the better. Grassroots movements, NGOs, and citizens have long shown their interest and skills to contribute to a healthier planet, making a lasting impact. Why are we not making sure that our subsidies are helping these people instead? Importantly, humans are not separate from nature. Our survival and prosperity is inextricably linked to the health of our nature, and this needs to be reflected in our economic systems, policies, and decision-making. In addition, we need to prioritize cooperation with all citizens, including indigenous peoples, women, the young, minorities, the disenfranchised, and the poor. It is they who feel the greatest impact while having the smallest say in the matter. Their voices must not only be heard, but acted upon and lifted up. Therefore, we call for financial and legislative resources for biodiversity, especially for communities and small businesses, alongside the elimination of harmful incentives. We call for the recognition of ecosystem services as the main driver of economic and human well-being. And we call for the empowerment and inclusion of women, youth, indigenous, and local communities, and the vulnerable in the decision-making process. We call for this because our future and our present depends on it. This is our call for action. Please sign our call for action via the link in the chat and join the movement. Finally, we express our gratitude to the Director General for Environment for giving us this space.
Thank you very much, Felix, Sophie, and Nienke, for that very interesting presentation. I think they have highlighted all the challenges that we have ahead. I'd like to go back first to the chat where Roberto Constantino answered my question. Biodiversity is extraordinary and fascinating. Yes, I definitely agree. And I'm going to go back now to the quiz and see what do you answer. I have to say that you get it right. You know a lot about biodiversity and implementation of the policy. So the first question was, what percentage of EU maritime protected areas have management plans? It was 15% the right answer, and 45% of you got it right. So that's really impressive. According to the BirdLife report, how many of the 11 member states who were found guilty of breaking EU environmental laws actually stopped the illegal activity? Only 7. And yet, again, you were right, 46% of you knew the answer. And then the EU's biggest commercial farms, 20% of all farms, receive how much of the EU's funding farmers? It's 80% nonetheless, and 54% got it right. Thank you very much for answering these questions. I think we have seen how many challenges we have ahead and the importance of the appropriate implementation of the policy. And to address this question, we are honored to have here today two very important policymakers in Europe. I would like to introduce Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevičius, who is in charge of environment, fisheries, and oceans. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today with us. And I'd like to introduce as well Director General for Environment, Sinkevičius, who is in charge of environment. As I said, we're going to have with them a quick-fire question and answer session. But first of all, I'd like to give the floor, Commissioner, for a short statement.
Thank you. Of course, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for this invitation. This is certainly one of the most unusual events I have taken part on biodiversity, and it is probably real pity that we have to do it remotely. I would love to have tried this in a completely different setting, especially the meditation part, I mean. It's definitely touched me because I really believe the same thing as you, that we all have a personal relationship with nature. Very direct and very physical. It might be swimming in the sea, or lake, or river, or walking in the forest. And for many of us, going back to nature is just like going home. That's how it feels to me. When I walk in the woods with my family, I can't imagine things for policymaker is holding on to that sense of immediacy. And you negotiate on sentences, on wording, on the fine of legal implications of text, sometimes in a closed room where you speak about single word, changing it or rephrasing it. It's really gets to a very academic fight with no reality in the room, especially in these times we are living at the moment. And when that happens, I think a personal memory that you can relate to can really help. When you remember the smell of the grass in the morning or the sight of the deer in the woods, those memories always keeps nature real and close. And I remember our first meeting with youth very well. It was nearly a year ago. I wasn't yet a commissioner. And I think you were actually the very first group of stakeholders I met face to face. It was extremely positive meeting. A lot has happened during that time. I was very much impressed with your knowledge then and always by drafting the biodiversity strategy, knowing that this might be not a buzzword. I knew that there is a community who really knows and whose heart is going to touch and who is going to be helping us to spread the word of how ambitious we are and how much we want to achieve. A lot has happened, of course, not only on the positive side, a lot has happened on the negative side, which nobody wanted, like burning forests or this virus. But nevertheless, I think we should not lose the momentum, and we must focus on a positive outcome, which we can do. After this virus, we can build back better. We can shift dramatically from practices which today is destroying and, of course, pushing biodiversity loss to a practices which are much more sustainable. The largest financial rescue package has been ever negotiated, and a new, of course, determination to deliver a greener, a more resilient society with do no harm principle is there. And I think this is an incredibly important achievement. And if we make it right, I think the progress which we want to achieve can be actually not only achieved, but accelerated, and we can do it faster. You probably know very well about a very ambitious strategy for biodiversity built around not just protecting nature, but most importantly, of course, restoring it and saving it for future generations. You know that we still have a huge amount of work ahead of us. I could hear that in your messages. Delivering the action plan that will make it happen is the most important. It's the key. And the strategy is the guiding line we need to follow. And by us, I mean everyone basically in the EU, but then outside the EU as well. It's a solid bedrock on which we can build on. And I know how much you care as well, because that comes through very strongly in the call for action. It is a powerful call. And I think people will sit up and listen. I'll be sharing it wherever I can. And of course, I'll do that with my team and my services. And of course, recommending people to read it very carefully in a quiet environment, like we started with meditation here to realize and understand. I would like to congratulate you on putting it together. And of course, I hope you can spread its messages as widely as possible, because we don't get upset about coronavirus taking the front pages. I think we still have a great momentum and opportunity window open for us, and we can make biodiversity a buzzword, and most importantly, we can deliver on that solid strategy which we crafted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm sure that Biodiversity Action Europe is very happy to hear your speech. And I was thinking now that when you were mentioning these deals that happened in rooms, maybe we need the European Council in December to go to a forest to discuss the climate neutrality objective, don't you? I would like to move now to Director General to hear from her. Please, you have the word.
Thank you. And I would like to address myself directly to BAA, the founders, the individuals, but also the many organizations and volunteers behind, because you spoke already with the Commissioner, you are in contact with my colleagues in DG Environment, but for me today it's the first time that we start our conversation, and I'm very happy to have that opportunity and also to start it, because when I listened to what you said about why is it important, and I think the Commissioner picked it up, also us, we are not just, yes, we are bureaucrats, but we all have our connection to nature. I, for instance, grew up literally next to a wood in Berlin at the time. And now if I plant my trees, because I see my trees in my garden, unfortunately, are not very healthy, I see whether or not my vegetables or my fruits have a good yield or not. I think we all have this reconnection to nature which is needed, but I do see that we have also as European officials the responsibility. And when I listen to what you said about how do you feel, I was quite impressed, because you are the ones who are having an enormous amount of knowledge about EU policies, more than I've seen in many other organizations sometimes. So you really put the spot on. And still you say, I'm anxious, I know that there are possibilities, but help us. And I think it's this sense of urgency that we feel also from our side, and where we need you to be our advocates. You give us the reality check. We need this critical soundboard, but we also need you as advocates, because if we want to really make that step change, we need more than a grassroots movement. We need to really say that now on the road to Kunming, we have to change. As European Commission, we have possibilities, but we have to take the member states with us, and you are in the member states, so that's why we need you. But I'm happy to engage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General. I think this exchange between policymakers and citizens, particularly when it comes to climate change, is something that we've seen a lot in the past few months. Even in the European elections, there was a call from the youth in Europe to have more protection against climate change. Let's start with a quick fire Q&A, and I'm going to start with Commissioner. So the first question would be, we are aware that some of the previous policies didn't always follow science. For instance, part of the agriculture and fisheries policies and trade deals such as the Mercosur trade agreement are hurting nature. The EU Green Deal and the Leaders' Pledge for Nature promise that the EU institutions, the parliaments, member states will work together to bring life in harmony with nature. how do you, as a commissioner, will make sure that all director generals, the commissioners, promised to really transformative change?
Absolutely. I mean, you're right here, because if we want a transformative change from society, which is going to touch upon every basically sector, not only agricultural or fisheries, but energy, transport, chemicals, and so on, we need all the departments on board. And here we have a very powerful answer, which this commission did from the very beginning of its mandate. It's the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal is overarching strategy. It's Europe's growth strategy, not only to 2030, but actually up to 2050. And that, of course, involves all the departments in the Commission to work together towards this trajectory. It's, of course, under the leadership of the President von der Leyen and Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans. And I think the first thing which I've noticed, which was very important, I think that we learning from the past mistakes. We are committed to integrating biodiversity, for example, better into other policies. When it was adopted in the college, it's the whole commission who worked on it, and every commissioner basically had more or less but something to say about it. It's not just that it was delivered by the DG Environment and me as a commissioner, but we have a number of commissioners working on this file, agreeing on it, making it not only ambitious but achievable, what is most important. And I think this is the most important part of the work, that all these strategies which we adopt, they are adopted together in the college. And of course, most importantly, that they support each other, like biodiversity strategy and farm to fork strategy, or for example, our circular economy action plan, which was adopted earlier, but again, it has a tremendous impact on biodiversity loss. If we manage to decouple economic growth from extraction of resources, we will decrease the pressure on biodiversity drastically. And in order to achieve that, we can name a number of departments who we need on board. Same goes with the latest adopted chemical strategy. If you look onto those actions, there is over 30 actions to do. It's not only DG Environment who will be in charge of them, it's other departments as well. But the goal we are reaching is actually to decarbonize as well, to reach the circle of goods production without hazardous chemicals. And that also goes back to our goal of circular economy action plan, and then does a huge favor to biodiversity. So as you see, we all are in this together. And in order for us to make this transition just and fair to everyone, and most importantly, get the society on board, of course, we need to, first of all, work as a team ourselves.
And I think it's clearly a reflection of that commitment to mainstreaming the fight against climate change, that we see that it's at the core of the recovery that the President von der Leyen presented. Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm going to move now to Director General for the second question. So, science unequivocally shows us that small-scale farmers, fishers, grassroots movements, and indigenous people and local communities are more efficient at conserving and restoring biodiversity than big-scale operators. And yet, they are lacking resources. Simultaneously, billions of euros are spent on unsustainable practices, and the EU needs to shift funding away from harmful subsidies and create funding structures that award small, quickly accessible grants that include payments for human resources. Will you ensure that this funding structure is implemented and prioritized as soon as possible, allowing this group to reach their full potential and enable a society that can live in harmony with nature? One, right?
Let me perhaps start with a very banal remark. The recovery fund is called Next Generation EU, and that's often forgotten. It is the stand for making a new type of recovery, a regenerative growth, a regenerative economy with a just transition, as the Commissioner just said. And President von der Leyen chose that word and that name carefully, also as a signal towards the member states, to those who will now come up with their investment plans. 750 billion are available for this type of recovery, but it is the member states who will put forward their national plans. Now, as a Commission, we are now already giving very strong signals. We have said 37% of it should be really used for the Green Deal objectives, 37% at least. We also made very clear indications about what type of investments could be indeed used for this, reaching that goal. And of course, we have said very clearly that the do no significant harm principle should be applied when looking at the investment and giving the funds. Now, in the end, it is the member states having to bring forward their national plans. And we, as I said, nudge them into perhaps the right investments, but it's their prerogative to come up. Perhaps I should say that these national plans will also be subject to a consultation. So I would also invite to look at the possibilities to influence this from the advocacy view.
Thank you, Director General. I think sometimes we forget that many of the EU actions, even though they're coming from Brussels, from the European Commission, they need a lot of engagement on the side of the member states, and when it comes to the recovery plan, is exactly that. So maybe we should put some pressure as well on the member states, right? I'm going to move back to the Commissioner for the last question. While rushing to meet quantitative targets for nature's protection, the qualitative aspect has been dangerously ignored within and beyond the EU. How will you ensure that during your time as a Commissioner, you will improve implementation and enforcement of the current and future legislation?
So probably we should, again, look back at the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. And our goal is not only to protect 30% of land and sea territories, but actually, first of all, to well manage it. And I always said from the very beginning, from my hearings, that that percentage, it's not really representing anything if it's not implemented properly. So, of course, our focus will go into enforcement and a proper implementation of the EU directives. And you also notice that the Commission proposes to strictly protect all the remaining primary and old-growth forests around the EU. And I'm glad that for this call, we have more and more, not only member states, but citizens actually joining and showing the importance of the old-growth forest around the EU. We are, of course, also committed to step up our efforts aimed at improving the implementation of existing EU legislation across the member states. Many of the remaining, let's say, virgin and old-growth forests are already in Natura 2000 sites. And we have launched, of course, infringement procedures against some member states for not managing these sites and protecting these forests properly. We will also develop new legally binding targets for restoration as part of a restoration plan, going well beyond what we have done before. I think here is the key that if we can measure, if we can track our progress, usually it gets achieved. And that's why I think with the new biodiversity strategy, the main change in the approach, because before that we had a biodiversity strategy and it wasn't too bad, and Aichi targets, they also are not too bad. But then again, I think the missing piece is actually being those targets binding, measurable, of course, and returning back to it every year to track and see the progress, and of course speak with those who were not able to do that. So I think a comprehensive new governance framework will help us check that we are on track to meet those commitments, and of course to take additional measures if it's necessary to to do. But most importantly, I think we know very well that we are committed to deliver.
It's very important that you mentioned the question of the follow-up. Once we have the legislation, we have to make sure that it's properly implemented. The Commission is the guardian of the treaty, so that's definitely your role. It's good to hear that you're committed to do so with the Biodiversity Strategy. Thank you so much, both Commissioner and Director General, for your answers. I'm sure that our audience is very glad to hear that you're very much committed to protect biodiversity. I'd like to ask some questions now to the NGOs that are part of Biodiversity Action Europe, because it's a movement supported by 47 organizations across the continent. Today, I would like to give the floor to 4 of them to share their opinions, their fears, and their will concerning biodiversity in Europe. So the format will be the same, really quick questions, but in this case, it will be only for an answer for 20 seconds, and there will be 3 questions for 4 organizations. So first, I'd like to introduce you Evelyn Philip. She's a project manager in the Estonian Green Movement of Friends of the Earth Estonian, a 30-year-old non-profit organization. At the moment, EGM is focusing on energy and climate, consumption and economy. Secondly, we'll have Hanna Berkovic. She is the director of Earth Advocacy Youth, an international organization group of young professionals in earth jurisprudence who work to build youth representation and earth-centered action in policymaking and education in topics such as biodiversity, climate, and ecosystem protection. And the third representative is Axel Hedrich, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, a local secretary for GNM Verhier. It's a Belgian youth movement for everyone aged 7 to 26 who feels good in nature, wants to learn more about it, and wants to work together for a better environment. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Esther Vallado, who is the head of the organization and coordinator of educational programs in Asociación Biodiversa, a grassroots environmental NGO focused on conserving nature through education and awareness raising. Could you, the 4 of you, tell us more about the obstacles that you face when you're working to protect biodiversity?
When solving environmental problems of any kind, we always have to consider that they consist of both levels, the environment and humans. In the 21st century, our scientists have developed effective methods for enhancing biodiversity. But the obstacles we still face is how to reach and change the mindset in our society with including all different social groups.
I think we have a problem with Hannah.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Apologies. I'm gonna go now. So honestly, my main obstacle is that despairing state of feeling overwhelmed by the level of urgency and the rapid loss of biodiversity. Most of the time as youth, I feel hopeful, fearless, and empowered when advancing Earth jurisprudence together with others. But every other month or so, I have these intense moments when an overwhelming feeling of defeat, anxiety, and powerlessness washes over me. In those moments, I feel like the work I do is insufficient and the influence I hold is not high enough to make the impact needed. So I refresh my memory about what I care about and why it matters, which helps me snap out of this discouraging state of mind and keep driving positive change.
In Belgium, the main problem, especially in Flanders, is that areas with the best biodiversity are too small and spread out. And the harder struggle for us is keeping the ecosystems healthy that need poor soils due to over-fertilization, and our wet habitats because the current climate situation.
I would say that the main obstacle is the lack of awareness and education on ecological matters. So what I call ecoliteracy. There are still many people who don't know what biodiversity is or are unaware of its importance in keeping our ecosystems healthy. They also seem to ignore that we are all connected and that our actions impact the whole web of life.
So according to you, what is a game changer in the biodiversity conservation struggle?
When we consider the obstacles that we face, we feel that real game changer is stronger environmental education and also media publications facing real issues of biodiversity. Yesterday, we had a conference where was presented a survey on environmental awareness, and there it became evident that there is a contradiction between considering him or herself being environmentally friendly and actually knowing about different environmental problems that exist.
5 months ago, I was sitting on my balcony in Ecuador watching hummingbirds fly by while I was listening to the river in the canyon. And I had an epiphany that completely changed my game plan. For me, contributing to long-term protection of biodiversity is only possible if I dare to peel back the layers and expose the core which fuels the system that today legitimizes mass ecocide. That is the game changer for me. Retracing the roots, asking myself what it means to be human on a planet with a complex web of life. Asking myself what message I wish to convey through my words and how those words make up the story that I apply to achieve my mission.
A game changer for me in Belgium is the concept of stepstones. So many animals cannot go from point A to B without needing to cross cornfields, open areas, roads. So we are trying to connect point A with B through orchards, pools, ecoducts, tunnels, so animals can safely travel from point A to B.
Maybe COVID-19 is the game changer. Maybe some people are starting to connect the dots now and realize that our destructive behavior towards nature is endangering our own health. COVID-19, in my view, definitely provides an opportunity to both revisit our relationship with nature and rebuild a more environmentally responsible world.
So the last question would be, why did you and your organization decided to support the call for action to protect biodiversity launched by Biodiversity Action Europe?
Biodiversity is a key element for natural balance and also for human well-being. When we can see that the problem evolves, our role is to speak up, encourage and support actions towards increasing biodiversity, and also share experience, which helps to succeed our goals more efficiently.
For us, Earth advocacy means understanding, recognizing, and co-creating with the living beings with whom we share this home on Earth. It's about working to break the false dichotomy that arrogantly enough tries to separate the human from nature. It is about realizing that we are nature too, that there exists an intrinsic and interdependent relationship we can never separate ourselves from. That is why we think it is the right time for this call for action. We're thankful for it and prepared to contribute the full contents of our ecocentric toolbox.
No, the biodiversity efforts are needed all over Europe. I've had an internship in the Biodiversity Valley in Poland and saw that the main three problems towards biodiversity are very similar to those in Belgium. So yeah, you have the politics, the budget, and climate change, really.
Me and Biodiversity, the organization that I represent, we fully agree with the demands presented in the call for action. We need to engage with science, enforce the demands presented in enforce the existing laws and regulations, and reshape the relationship that we have with nature. We believe that we need to get together to amplify the message that if we destroy biodiversity, we destroy the system that supports life in this planet. If we act now, we can revert this tendency and ensure that our survival is possible and also the survival of the coming generation.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, Hannah, Axel, and Esther for your answers. It was very inspiring, and I think it gives us a better idea of what it's like to fight to protect biodiversity all around Europe from a grassroots movement and civil society. I'd like to go back to the answers that you gave to us about why is biodiversity important to you. And I'd like to list, one of them is nature has been giving food and shelter for us, time back, shelter for us, each time I don't really understand this one, but it's been giving food and shelter for us for a very long time. I think this is particularly beautiful by Jay. He says, to me, nature means life and happiness. It means connecting to who we are. It means health and well-being, and it means everything we need for our communities to be protected and sustained. And also I get another from Boran. He says, nature is the essence of life. It is as important as our life. People think we are separate from nature, but we are part of the ecosystem that needs us and need it back. I'd like to thank the audience for this answer. And I think if you definitely care about biodiversity, if you'd like to see our environment better protected, you definitely have to go and check the call for action that Biodiversity Action Europe has put forward to try and encourage governments, but also the European Commission to make sure that we protect our environment. And you can find it in their website, in their social media pages, so go, check, click, and if you feel that you want to contribute, do sign up at the petition. Everything, every step is important. We're coming to the end of this session. I'm going to ask you again to relax, to take a few minutes to just give it a thought about everything that we've learned today, and close your eyes for a last meditation session before we come to an end. Inhale deeply for 4 seconds through the nose. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. Release the air through your mouth. Start relaxing your feet and toes, and then move up to your knees, thighs, chest, arms, hands, neck, jaw, and eyes. With your mind, go back to the forest we imagined at the beginning of the session. That is where we are returning to right now. The forest is still there, so embrace its elements. Are there any animals around, and can you hear them moving? While you're walking, you hear the crunch of stepping on dry leaves. Inhale deep and slow for 4 seconds through the nose. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. Release the air through your mouth. Let's repeat this again while the image of the forest is vivid in your mind and you're fully included in nature. Inhale deep and slow for 4 seconds through the nose. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. Slowly, while you open your eyes, focus on what you can't see around you. How much vegetation can you see? If you open your windows, is there any noise left behind? Are you lucky enough to be able to drink the water that comes from your tap? Each season, thousands of migratory birds fly over your sky. Woodcock, stonechat, robin, windchat. Have you ever stopped and tried to see or identify one? Nature is within and all around us. We need to fully commit ourselves and dedicate everything we have to reestablish the connection and nurture the relationship with nature. The environment will always be there to exist, but will we? Thank you very much for joining us today for this Lights Off session. Thank you to the Commissioner and the Director General and to all these young people all across Europe that were there to share their motivation to fight to protect biodiversity in Europe. And thank you, the audience, for being here today with us. I hope that you have a very nice closing of this EU Green Week that has been enriching and very interesting, I'm sure, for us. And if you would like to contribute, go and check the website of Biodiversity Europe and sign up their petition to protect biodiversity.